budget 2018 is going to be a quite insightful budget. But before taking on this question, I would like to maybe taking it on a more broader level.
Yeah.
So I think the economy as a whole is doing quite well. On the growth front, we are registering a growth of around more than 6%. Just day before yesterday, IMF has come out with its forecast that in 2018 and 19 fiscal year, we might be the fastest growing economy in the world again. The inflation is again in a very manageable level. The current account deficit is quite low, it's below 2%. The fiscal deficit is something that we are focusing upon. We are trying to manage it and move towards a path of fiscal consolidation. The forex reserves, again, we are very comfortable with $400 billion worth of forex reserves, and the currency is also quite stable. So overall, on the macroeconomic front, I would like to say that India is performing quite well. On a micro level, taking into account that the various reforms which has been ushered in by the government, be it GST, demonetization, RERA, housing for all, IBC, all of these factors indicate that we are moving in a very good direction. I think I have three broader themes in mind. One is the fiscal consolidation path. Already we are having hue and cries over the fiscal deficit percentage, and that the government might just cross it over. Right, so number one, moving towards a path of fiscal consolidation is one. Number two, I think infrastructure needs to be given a much major thrust, taking into account that we are a developing nation. We have more than 50% of our population below 35. So I think in a growing economy, infrastructure, roadways, highways, hospitals, buildings, so all of these things are something which the government needs to focus more upon. So infrastructure is number two, and then employment.
I want to tease out the point on fiscal deficit. Yes, there are both pros and cons for targeting a conservative share of the GDP, let's say 3.2% or 3.5%, which we're anyway going to cross this year. So the argument for hitting or crossing that deficit is that, okay, we need growth in the economy, we need to generate employment, and it's okay.
You think the government should cut spend just to meet the targets? So you feel that government should cut on these things? But I think you had a different opinion when we started the discussion.
No, so my opinion is basically concerned on the fact that our fiscal deficit ranges between 3 to 4%, and we are moving in that range. But the number one fact is, looking at a macro level again, the debt to GDP of our country is 70%. When compared to other developed countries like USA and Japan, Japan is sitting on a debt to GDP ratio of more than 200%, and USA has already crossed 100%. My only point is we should be spending more than that we currently do, not for our consumption sake, not for the sake of being populist or for the sake of providing subsidies, but by channeling that money into infrastructure, into capex, because that is ultimately what is going to drive and push the growth engine forward. So again, the global rating agencies, our debt, our bond market, our sovereign debt gets a very low rating in the global market, whereas those guys, they have a AAA rating or the highest grades. So when we approach the external markets to raise funds, we are discriminated against. Our currency starts to depreciate. Our inflation factor starts to go up. So all of those problems arise. What I mean to say is, even if we should try and maybe shift our policy range of fiscal deficit to more than 3.2%, and not just for the sake of revenue, but for the capex, for driving the capex forward.
So you think that if the fiscal deficit target, this target needs to be revised, so it should not be 3.2 or 3.5%, it should be much higher than that, just from the capex perspective. So anyone on that?
So I think considering the rising oil prices in the international market and our dependence on that, the way we service our debt is going to be something which is pretty critical. So I think while easing fiscal deficit is something which might be favorable, like how Saurabh said, we need to keep a check on how much we should ease. So maybe say from 3.2 to 3.5 might be acceptable. Beyond that, I'm not too sure about how far we can go with that. And regarding investment, like how Saurabh mentioned, I think investment is something which is really critical. The share of investment in GDP, in India's GDP over the past few years has been declining. compared to the other components. And so we've taken measures, the government has taken measures such as recap of banks, which has helped the banks clean their balance sheet and powered them to lend more. So I think when we are giving a supply thrust by enabling the banks to lend more, probably incentivizing private investment at this point more than what we did before might be helpful. So wherein we can merge the demand and supply together. And I think so that's why a theme of this budget also, apart from agriculture and rural upliftment, should also be to encourage private investment. And maybe one more thing which we could do regarding investment is to revive the public-private partnership model. Due to whatever reason, there have been implementation issues, although this has been conceived before. So I think we could work on those aspects in case of investments.
For more updates on budget, visit timesnownews.com.